Zexai stared at the empty screen where the map should have been. The quantum scanner hummed quietly in the corner of the laboratory, its blue lights blinking in a steady pattern. Everything looked normal. Everything was working perfectly. But the map was wrong again. The Veltar scientist touched the screen with one of his 6 fingers. The holographic display showed the galaxy in perfect detail. Thousands of star systems glowed like tiny diamonds. Trade routes stretched between worlds like golden threads. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid belt was marked with careful precision. But at the edge of human territory, everything just stopped. "Computer, run diagnostic scan on Sector 7749, Zexai said in his native language. The translation device on his collar turned his words into common galactic speech. "All systems functioning within normal parameters," the computer replied. "Scanning equipment shows no errors." Zexai's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep worry among his people. The Veltar had been mapping the galaxy for over 3,000 years. They were known throughout all civilized space as the best cartographers. Their maps were used by every species, every government, every trading company. Veltar maps never failed, until now. He walked to the window of his laboratory. Outside, the great space station called Harmony Hub slowly turned in the darkness. Ships from dozens of different worlds came and went like busy insects. The station was one of the most important places in the galaxy. Representatives from every major species worked here together. It was supposed to be a place where all knowledge was shared, but some knowledge, it seemed, could not be shared. Zexai turned back to his work. He had been trying to map the outer edge of human space for 6 months now. Every probe he sent disappeared. Not destroyed, that would leave wreckage, energy signatures, some trace of what happened. These probes simply vanished as if they had never existed at all. The door to his laboratory slid open with a soft hiss. Admiral Sarah Chen walked in, her human face wearing the polite smile that all diplomats learn to use. She was tall for a human with short black hair and dark eyes that seemed to notice everything. "Good morning, Zexai," she said in perfect Veltar. "I heard you wanted to discuss the mapping project." Zexai's translator turned off automatically when he heard his own language. Admiral Chen was one of the few humans who had learned to speak Veltar properly. It was a sign of respect that he appreciated, even though he was frustrated with her people. "Admiral Chen," he replied, switching to common galactic speech so his words would be recorded. "Thank you for coming. I need to discuss the problems we are having with Sector 7749. "What kind of problems?" Admiral Chen's voice was calm and professional. She sat down in the chair across from his desk, her movements careful and controlled. Zexai activated the holographic display again. The galaxy appeared between them, spinning slowly. "For 6 months I have been trying to complete our survey of the region beyond your territory. Every probe we send fails to return data. Equipment failures happen," Admiral Chen said with a small shrug. "Perhaps the probes are encountering some kind of natural phenomenon. Space storms, maybe, or unusual magnetic fields?" "No." Zexai's voice was firm. "I have checked every possibility. The probes are functioning perfectly when they cross into Sector 7749. Their signals are clear and strong. Then suddenly nothing. Not static, not interference, not damage reports. Nothing at all." Admiral Chen leaned forward slightly. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I am not suggesting anything. I am stating facts. 12 advanced survey probes have entered the space beyond your territorial boundary. None have returned. None have sent any data. It is as if they stopped existing the moment they crossed the line." The human diplomat was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was even more careful than before. "The Galactic Council established those territorial boundaries for good reasons, Zexai. Perhaps it would be better to focus your mapping efforts on other regions. Other regions are already mapped." Zexai's voice rose and he had to force himself to stay calm. "The Veltar have been trusted with creating accurate maps of the entire galaxy. How can we do our job if we cannot map every sector? Some sectors are more important than others," Admiral Chen said softly. "And some are more dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Zexai demanded. "What is out there that destroys our most advanced technology without leaving any trace?" Admiral Chen stood up slowly. "I think this conversation is over, my friend. The human government appreciates your dedication to accuracy, but we must respectfully request that you stop sending probes into that region." "This is not a request from the human government," Zexai said. "This is a requirement from the Galactic Mapping Consortium. We have the legal right to survey any region of space that is not privately owned. And Sector 7749 is privately owned, Admiral Chen replied. By humanity, Zexai checked his records quickly. According to our files, human territory ends at the Kepler barrier. Sector 7749 is marked as unclaimed space. Then your files are wrong, Admiral Chen said. She walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Zexai, you are a good scientist and a good friend to humanity. Please trust me when I say that some mysteries are better left unsolved. The door closed behind her with a soft hiss, leaving Zexai alone with his broken maps. He sat in his chair for a long time, thinking. In all his years of mapping, he had never encountered anything like this. The Veltar were methodical people. They believed in facts and data and careful observation. They did not believe in mysteries that could not be solved. But this mystery was different. It was not just that the probes disappeared. It was that nobody seemed to care. Zexai activated his communication system and called his supervisor, an elderly Veltar named Morden, who had been mapping space for longer than Zexai had been alive. Morden, he said when the old scientist's face appeared on the screen. I need to report a problem with the Sector 7749 survey. Ah, young Zexai, Morden replied. His 4 eyes showed amusement. Still trying to map the human border regions? Yes, and I am having serious problems. All of our probes are disappearing, yes, I know. Morden's expression became serious. I have read your reports. Then why have you not responded? This is a major failure of our equipment. We need to investigate what is causing— No, Morden said firmly. We do not need to investigate. We need to accept that some regions cannot be mapped and move on to other work. Zexai felt a chill run through his body. Morden, you are not making sense. The Veltar do not give up on mapping projects. We have never failed to complete a survey. There is a first time for everything, the old scientist said. Focus your efforts on the Andorian sector instead. I have new assignments for you. The communication ended abruptly. Zexai stared at the blank screen in shock. In all his years working with Morden, he had never heard him give up on a mapping project. The Veltar took pride in their completeness, their accuracy, their refusal to leave any system uncharted. But somehow, everyone seemed willing to make an exception for human space. Zex's. I walked back to the window and looked out at the ships. Coming and going from Harmony Hub, he watched a sleek human vessel dock at one of the lower ports. It was a beautiful ship, with smooth lines and no visible weapons. Humans claimed to be peaceful traders and diplomats. Their ships were fast but not heavily armed. Their technology seemed advanced but not revolutionary. So why was everyone so afraid to look too closely at their territory? As he watched, more ships arrived. Krillian heavy cruisers with their thick armor plating, delicate ethereal science vessels that looked like they were made of crystal and light, massive Torgan cargo haulers bringing goods from across the galaxy. All of these different species, with their different technologies and different ways of thinking, had one thing in common. None of them questioned the fact that human territory could not be mapped, and that, Zexai realized, was the most frightening thing of all. 3 days after his strange conversation with Morden, Zexai found himself in the deepest parts of the Harmony Hub archives. The old data storage levels were quiet and dimly lit. Most researchers preferred to work with current information, leaving the historical records to gather dust in the digital vaults. But Zexai was not looking for current information. He wanted to know when the mapping problems had started. The Veltar scientist moved through the narrow corridors between massive data storage units. Each unit contained millions of years of galactic history, trade records, diplomatic communications, scientific discoveries, military reports. Everything that had happened in civilized space was stored somewhere in these depths. He found what he was looking for in Section C7, First Contact Records. The files were organized by species and date. Zexai pulled up the human files and began to read. The first human contact had occurred 200 years ago. A small ship had appeared at the edge of Krillian space, broadcasting a simple message in basic mathematical concepts. The ship was primitive by galactic standards, barely capable of faster-than-light travel. The crew consisted of 5 humans who spoke only their native language. Zexai read through the early reports with growing interest. The first human diplomats had been led by a woman named Captain Elizabeth Torres. She had been described as determined but peaceful by the Krillian officials who met with her. The humans had asked for very little, just recognition as a spacefaring species and a small territory where they could establish colonies. The request had been granted easily. The region they wanted was on the outer rim of the galaxy, far from any important trade routes or valuable resources. Most species considered it empty space, useful only as a buffer zone between civilized territory and the unknown regions beyond. But as HFY read further, he began to notice something strange. The early reports described human technology as adequate but unremarkable. Their ships were slow, their weapons were basic, and their scientific knowledge seemed limited to what they needed for space travel. Yet somehow, these same humans had been able to travel thousands of light years from their home system to make first contact. That should have required much more advanced technology than what the reports described as HFY made a note to investigate this contradiction later and continued reading. The humans had been granted territory in what was now called the Sol Expansion Zone. It included their home system and about 50 nearby star systems. For a new species, it was actually quite generous. The galactic community had been feeling optimistic in those days, and there was a movement to welcome new civilizations with open arms. The early years of human integration had gone smoothly. They established colonies, began trading with other species, and sent representatives to the Galactic Council. Their diplomats were polite and reasonable. Their traders were honest and reliable. Their scientists shared their discoveries freely with the galactic community. Everything had been normal until the Drakmor incident. HFY found the file buried deep in the military archives. The Drakmor Empire had been one of the most aggressive species in the galaxy. They believed that strength gave them the right to take whatever they wanted from weaker species. They had conquered dozens of worlds and enslaved entire populations. 50 years after first contact with humans, the Drakmor had decided that human territory looked valuable. Intelligence reports suggested that several human worlds had rich mineral deposits. More importantly, the humans seemed weak. Their military was small, their weapons were simple, and their colonies were lightly defended. The Drakmor High Command had assembled a massive invasion fleet. 3,000 warships carrying over 1 million soldiers. It was enough firepower to conquer most civilizations in the galaxy. The fleet had departed Drakmor space with great fanfare. Military parades, speeches from generals, celebrations in the streets. The Drakmor media had called it the final expansion that would establish their empire as the dominant power in the galaxy. HFY read through the intelligence reports that tracked the fleet's progress. It had moved steadily toward human space, taking almost 3 months to cross the distance. Long-range sensors had monitored its approach. Diplomatic channels had buzzed with speculation about whether the humans would surrender or fight. Then, at the edge of human territory, the fleet had simply stopped reporting. The first assumption was equipment failure. Communication blackouts happened sometimes in deep space. But when backup fleets were sent to investigate, they found nothing. No wreckage, no energy signatures, no trace that 3,000 Drakmor ships had ever existed. More disturbing was what happened next. Within weeks of the fleet's disappearance, the Drakmor Empire began to collapse, not from external attack, not from internal revolution, but from a strange kind of social amnesia. The Drakmor people seemed to forget that they had ever been a military empire. Their aggressive culture simply evaporated. HFY read the anthropological reports with growing confusion. The Drakmor had transformed almost overnight from a warlike civilization into peaceful farmers and merchants. When galactic investigators interviewed them, most Drakmor claimed they had never heard of the invasion fleet. Military records had been deleted or corrupted. Even the families of soldiers who had served on the fleet seemed to have no memory of their relatives. The official galactic investigation had concluded that the Drakmor had suffered some kind of mass psychological breakdown. The report suggested that their aggressive culture had become unsustainable and collapsed under its own weight. The disappearance of the fleet was listed as a probable military accident with no evidence of foul play. Case closed. File archived. Nothing more to investigate, but HFY noticed something that the official investigators had missed. The transformation of Drakmor culture had happened at exactly the same time as the fleet's disappearance. Not weeks later, not months later, but simultaneously. He began searching for other incidents. The files were scattered across different databases and different time periods, but patterns began to emerge. The The Velcron hegemony had tried to establish research stations in human space 70 years ago. The stations had vanished, and the Velcron had inexplicably decided that scientific research was less important than art and philosophy. The Zephyrian Trade Consortium had attempted to build mining operations near human territory 30 years ago. The mining ships had disappeared, and the consortium had suddenly shifted their business model from resource extraction to cultural exchange programs. The Stellan Military Alliance had conducted defensive patrols along the human border just 15 years ago. An entire battle group had vanished, and the Alliance had promptly signed a peace treaty with every neighboring civilization. Each time, the same pattern. Someone tried to expand into or investigate human space. They disappeared without a trace. And then the aggressing civilization underwent a fundamental change in culture and priorities, always away from militarism and toward peaceful pursuits. Zexhai leaned back in his chair and stared at the data scrolling across his screen. The official records never connected these incidents. They were filed under different categories by different investigators at different times. Unless someone was specifically looking for a pattern, it would be almost impossible to notice. But there was definitely a pattern. He activated his personal recording device and began to speak quietly. Personal Research Log, Day 3. I have discovered what appears to be a systematic something occurring around human territory. Multiple civilizations have attempted expansion or investigation into human space. All attempts have resulted in complete disappearance of the investigating forces, followed by immediate cultural transformation of the aggressing civilization. Zexhai paused, trying to think of how to express what he was seeing. The transformations are not random. In every case, the affected civilization becomes significantly more peaceful and less interested in territorial expansion. It is as if, he stopped, as if what? As if something was deliberately changing their minds. As if human territory was protected by some kind of invisible force that not only destroyed intruders, but also eliminated their motivation to intrude. That was impossible. No known technology could affect entire civilizations across vast distances of space. No known force could selectively edit the memories and motivations of billions of individuals simultaneously. But the evidence was right. There in the archives. Zexhai saved his research and prepared to leave the archives. As he walked back through the dark corridors, he felt as though he was being watched. The feeling was probably just paranoia, but he found himself looking over his shoulder more than once. When he reached the main levels of Harmony Hub, the bright lights and busy crowds made him feel a little better. But the feeling of unease remained. He had uncovered something that powerful people clearly did not want discovered. The question was, what was he going to do about it? As he walked toward his quarters, Zexhai passed a group of human diplomats in one of the station's main corridors. They were laughing and talking about some trade negotiation, looking completely ordinary and harmless. One of them, a middle-aged man with gray hair, glanced in Zexhai's direction and smiled politely. "Good evening," he said in accented Veltar. "Good evening," Zexhai replied automatically. Zexhai could not sleep. He lay in his small quarters aboard Harmony Hub, staring at the ceiling and thinking about what he had discovered. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that datapad with his research project listed on it. The humans knew what he was doing, but they had not tried to stop him. Why? After several hours of restless thinking, he got up and went to his computer terminal. If the humans were monitoring him anyway, there was no point in being subtle. He needed more information, and he needed it quickly. He started by searching for any non-human who had lived long enough to remember the early days of human contact. Most species lived for about the same length of time as humans, but a few had much longer lifespans. The Krillians could live for over 500 years. The Ethereals sometimes lived for 1,000 years or more. Zexhai found what he was looking for in the residential directory. Council Prime Thurok was a Krillian who had been serving on the Galactic Council for over 3 centuries. According to his records, he had been part of the first contact team that had met with the humans 200 years ago. The Veltar scientist sent a formal request for an interview. To his surprise, Thurok agreed to meet with him. That same day, the Krillian's office was located in one of the most prestigious sections of Harmony Hub. The walls were covered with awards and honors from dozens of different civilizations. Thurok himself was an impressive figure. nearly 3 meters tall with thick gray scales and intelligent yellow eyes. "Young HFY," Thurok said in his deep, rumbling voice. "I understand you have questions about the humans." "Yes, Council Prime. I am working on a mapping project that involves human territory, and I have encountered some unusual problems." Thurok gestured for HFY to sit down. The old Krillian moved slowly and carefully, as if each movement required thought. "What kind of problems?" HFY explained about the disappearing probes and the failed mapping attempts. Thurok listened without interrupting, his yellow eyes never leaving HFY's face. "And what do you think is causing these problems?" Thurok asked when HFY had finished. "I do not know, but I have been researching the history of human contact with other species, and I have found some disturbing patterns." "What kind of patterns?" HFY hesitated. He was about to share information that could be considered classified or sensitive. But Thurok was a member of the Galactic Council. If anyone had the right to know, it was him. Multiple civilizations have attempted to expand into or investigate human space over the past 2 centuries. All of these attempts have failed completely, with no survivors or wreckage ever found. More disturbing, each failed attempt has been followed by major cultural changes in the aggressing civilization. Thurok was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. "You have been very thorough in your research. Council Prime, were you aware of these patterns?" "I am aware of many things, young HFY. The question is whether knowledge is always beneficial." That was not the answer HFY had been hoping for. "What do you remember about first contact with the humans? Were there any signs that they were more advanced than they appeared?" Thurok stood up and walked to the large window that looked out over the docking bays of Harmony Hub. "I remember meeting Captain Torres and her crew. They seemed like ordinary people from a young civilization. They were polite, curious, and eager to learn about galactic society. But something bothered you about them? Not bothered exactly, but there were small things that did not quite fit. Their ship, for example. It was supposedly primitive, but it had traveled farther and faster than should have been possible with their technology. When our engineers examined it, they found systems they could not understand or replicate." HFY felt a chill of excitement. "What kind of systems?" "Power generation that seemed to violate conservation of energy. Navigation computers that tracked their location with impossible precision. And most strange of all, the ship's hull was made of materials that our best scientists could not identify or analyze." "Did you report these findings?" "Of course. But somehow the reports were lost or classified at such a high level that even I could not access them later. Within a few months, everyone seemed to forget that there had been anything unusual about human technology." "Everyone except you?" Thurok turned away from the window and looked at HFY directly. "I have lived for a long time, young scientist. I have learned that some memories are more persistent than others, and I have learned that sometimes forgetting is not a choice." "What do you mean?" "Tell me something, HFY. In all your research, did you find any records of a species called the Vorthon Collective?" HFY searched his memory. "No, I have never heard of them. I am not surprised. Few people remember them now. But 30 years ago, the Vorthon were one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. They controlled over 200 star systems. They had technology that was advanced even by current standards. They were known for their military might and their aggressive expansion policies. What happened to them? They tried to claim human territory." Thurok's voice was grim. "I remember the debates in the Galactic Council. The Vorthon ambassador insisted that humans were occupying space that rightfully belonged to a more advanced civilization. He presented evidence that human colonies were mining resources that the Vorthon needed for their expansion. And then they launched the largest invasion fleet in galactic history. 50,000 ships carrying 10 million soldiers. It was supposed to be the final proof of Vorthon superiority." HFY waited, but Thurok seemed lost in his memories. "What happened to the fleet?" HFY asked quietly. "That is the strange part. I remember the fleet launching. I remember the fear that other species felt when we realized the scale of the Vorthon ambitions. I remember emergency sessions of the Galactic Council where we debated whether to intervene. But I cannot remember what happened next. One day the Vorthon were the greatest threat in the galaxy. The next day they simply did not exist anymore. Not just their fleet, their entire civilization. 200 star systems, billions of people, thousands of years of history. Gone. That is impossible." "Is it?" Thurok asked. "You are a scientist, HFY. You deal with facts and evidence. What evidence do you have that the Vorthan Collective ever existed? Zexai realized with growing horror that Thurok was right. In all his research, he had found no mention of any civilization called the Vorthan Collective. No trade records, no diplomatic communications, no scientific papers. It was as if they had been completely erased from history. How do you remember them if there are no records? I do not know, Thurok admitted. Perhaps my memory is faulty. Perhaps I'm confusing them with some other civilization. But I remember them clearly. And I remember being afraid of what happened to them. Afraid of what? Afraid that the same thing could happen to any of us. Thurok sat down heavily in his chair. Young Zexai, I am going to give you some advice. Stop your investigation. Stop asking questions about human territory. Stop trying to map regions that cannot be mapped. Why? Because some knowledge is too dangerous to possess. And because I have a feeling that you are very close to learning something that you will wish you had never discovered. Zexai left Thurok's office with more questions than answers. The old Krillian story about the Vorthan Collective was terrifying, but it was also impossible to verify. How could an entire civilization simply vanish from all records? How could billions of people be erased not just from existence but from memory itself? As he walked through the corridors of Harmony Hub, Zexai began to notice things he had not seen before. Human diplomats and traders were everywhere, but they moved through the station with a quiet confidence that seemed unusual for representatives of such a young civilization. Other species treated them with a respect that bordered on deference. He decided to conduct a small experiment. At a busy intersection where multiple corridors met, he stopped and activated his personal scanner. The device was designed to analyze the basic properties of nearby materials and energy sources. It was completely harmless and completely legal. Zexai aimed the scanner at a group of human traders who were discussing cargo manifests near one of the shops. The scanner immediately began displaying readings that made no sense. The humans appeared to be generating some kind of low-level energy field that the scanner could not classify. More disturbing, the field seemed to be affecting the behavior of other species in the area. A Krillian merchant who had been arguing loudly with a shop owner suddenly became calm and polite. Two Veltar engineers who had been debating a technical problem stopped their discussion and began agreeing with each other. A group of ethereal scientists who had been rushing to catch a transport slowed down and began walking at a leisurely pace. All of these changes happened while the humans were simply standing there, talking about trade goods. Zexai turned off his scanner and stepped away from the intersection. As soon as he moved beyond a certain distance from the humans, the other species returned to their normal behavior. The Krillian began arguing again. The Veltar resumed their technical debate. The ethereals hurried to catch their transport. The humans had not done anything obvious. They had not spoken to the other species or even looked at them directly. Zexai did not have to wait long. The next morning, Admiral Chen was waiting outside his laboratory when he arrived for work. She was not alone. 3 other humans stood with her, all wearing the simple gray uniforms of diplomatic security. "Good morning, Zexai," Admiral Chen said with her usual polite smile. "I hope you do not mind if we talk privately in your laboratory. It was not really a question." Zexai opened the door and let them inside. The security personnel took positions near the entrance while Admiral Chen walked to the center of the room. "I understand you have been conducting some interesting research," she said. "I am a scientist." Zexai replied carefully. "Research is what I do. Of course. But some research can lead to dangerous conclusions if not properly understood." Admiral Chen activated a small device that she took from her pocket. Immediately, all of the electronic systems in the laboratory went quiet. The computer screens went dark, the scanners stopped humming, and even the air circulation system slowed to a whisper. "A privacy field," Admiral Chen explained. "What we discuss here will not be recorded or monitored by anyone." Zexai felt a chill run through his body. "What do you want to discuss?" "Your mapping project, your investigation into human territory, your research into historical incidents involving our civilization. All of my research has been completely legal and within my authority as a galactic cartographer." "Yes, it has." Admiral Chen sat down in the chair across from his desk. "That is what makes this conversation necessary. You have discovered things that most people are not capable of understanding." "What have I discovered?" "You tell me, Zexai. What do you think humans really are?" The direct question caught him off guard. He had expected denials, explanations, perhaps threats. He had not expected Admiral Chen to simply ask him to share his conclusions. "I think," he said slowly, "that humans are not what they appear to be. I think your civilization is far more advanced than you claim, and I think you have abilities that other species do not understand." "Very good. What else?" "I think you can make people forget things, change their behavior, erase civilizations from existence and from memory." Admiral Chen nodded approvingly. "You are correct about all of that. What you do not understand is why." "Then explain it to me." Admiral Chen was quiet for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Tell me, Zexai, what do you know about the region of space where humanity originated?" "It is on the outer rim of the galaxy, far from most civilized worlds." "That is correct, but incomplete. The region where Earth is located sits at the intersection of several dimensional boundaries. Space and time work differently there. The barriers between realities are thin." Zexai did not understand, but he listened carefully. "Most species evolve in normal space," Admiral Chen continued. "Their consciousness develops within the standard 3 dimensions plus time. But humans evolved in a region where consciousness can extend into other dimensions." "What does that mean?" "It means that human awareness exists partially outside of normal space-time. We do not just observe reality, Zexai. We participate in creating it." The Veltar scientist stared at her. "That is impossible." "Is it?" "You have seen the evidence yourself. When humans are threatened, when our survival is at stake, our collective unconscious reacts to eliminate the threat. Not just physically, but causally. We do not destroy our enemies. We make it so they never existed in the first place." "The Vorthon Collective," Zexai whispered. "Among others. Most humans are not consciously aware of this ability. It operates at a level deeper than thought, deeper than individual will. It is a species-wide survival mechanism that has kept us alive in a universe full of civilizations that could destroy us with conventional weapons." Zexai tried to process what he was hearing. "You are telling me that humans can alter reality itself?" "In a limited way, yes. We cannot create something from nothing, and we cannot change the fundamental laws of physics, but we can edit the causal chains that lead to our extinction. When a civilization decides to destroy humanity, we unconsciously reach back through time and probability to make different choices happen. But that would require enormous amounts of energy. The power needed to alter causality across galactic distances? Where do you think that power comes from?" Admiral Chen asked. "I do not know. From the same source that powers all consciousness, all thought, all life in the universe. Most species use only a tiny fraction of their mental potential. Humans learn to use much more, but not through technology or science, through necessity." Admiral Chen stood up and walked to the window. "Imagine you are a primitive species on a dangerous world. Predators everywhere, natural disasters, competing tribes trying to kill you. Normal evolution would give you better muscles, sharper teeth, thicker skin. But what if your world was so dangerous that physical improvements were not enough? Evolution would find other solutions," Zexai said slowly. "Exactly. And the solution it found for humanity was consciousness that could reach beyond the normal boundaries of space and time. We became predators of causality itself." "Why are you telling me this?" Admiral Chen turned back to face him. "Because you have already figured out most of it on your own. And because you need to understand what you are dealing with before you make a decision that could endanger both of us." "What decision?" "Whether to share your discoveries with the rest of the galactic community." Zexai felt suddenly afraid. What would happen if I did? Panic, fear, attempts to contain or eliminate humanity before we could react, and that Zexai would trigger exactly the response you have been investigating. When humans feel threatened as a species, our unconscious minds reach out and eliminate the source of the threat. You would erase entire civilizations just to protect yourselves? Not by choice. Most humans do not even know this ability exists. But our unconscious minds do not distinguish between individual threats and species-level threats. If the galactic community decided that humanity was too dangerous to exist, our survival instinct would activate. Admiral Chen sat down again and looked directly into Zexai's eyes. Do you understand what that means, my friend? It means that your decision could literally determine whether billions of innocent people continue to exist. That is not fair, Zexai said. You cannot put that responsibility on me. I am not putting it on you. It is simply the reality of the situation. You have discovered something that could destroy the peace that has existed in this galaxy for 200 years. Why have you not told the Galactic Council the truth? Because most species cannot handle the truth. They would see humans as a threat to be eliminated rather than neighbors to be respected. They would not understand that we want nothing more than to live peacefully alongside other civilizations. Admiral Chen activated another device, and suddenly, the air in the room changed. Zexai felt a strange calm settle over his mind. His fear began to fade, replaced by a sense of clarity and understanding. "What are you doing to me?" he asked. "Helping you think clearly without the influence of fear or anger. This is another human ability. We can affect the emotional states of other species. Not control their minds, but calm their emotions so they can make rational decisions. Is this what you do to keep the peace? Manipulate other species emotionally? Only when necessary, and only to reduce conflict, never to cause it. Human diplomats carry this ability naturally. It helps prevent misunderstandings from escalating into wars." Zexai realized that he was facing a choice that no member of his species had ever faced before. He could expose the truth about humanity and risk triggering a galactic catastrophe, or he could remain silent and become part of a conspiracy to hide the most important secret in the known universe. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "That is entirely your decision, Zexai. But I want you to understand all of your options before you choose." Admiral Chen stood up and gestured to one of the security personnel, who approached carrying a small metal case. "Option 1, she said, opening the case. "You can accept this memory adjustment device. It will remove your discoveries from your mind, leaving you with the impression that your mapping project encountered natural phenomena that made it impossible to complete. You will return to your normal life and work with no memory of this conversation. Option 2, you keep your memories and your knowledge, but you agree to remain silent about what you have learned. You would be welcome to continue your research, but only with proper supervision and safeguards. There are others like you, non-humans who know the truth about our species. They work with us to maintain galactic stability." And option 3, Admiral Chen's expression became sad. "You reveal what you have discovered to the galactic community. The probable result would be panic, fear, and eventual attempts to eliminate humanity. Our unconscious response would be to erase the civilizations that threaten us. Billions of people would die, including most likely yourself." Zexai looked at the memory adjustment device in the case. It was small and simple, no bigger than his hand. With one touch, he could return to his old life and never have to deal with this terrible knowledge again. But he was a scientist. The search for truth was everything to him. "If I choose option 2, he said, "what exactly would I be agreeing to help us maintain the peace?" Zexai spent 3 days thinking about Admiral Chen's offer. He barely ate, barely slept. He walked through Harmony Hub like a person in a dream, seeing everything differently now that he understood what humans really were. On the 3rd day, as he sat in his laboratory staring at the memory adjustment device, an alarm began to sound throughout the station. It was not the normal alert for docking problems or system failures. This was the emergency signal that meant immediate danger to the entire galactic community. Zexai ran to the main communications center, along with hundreds of other beings from dozens of different species. The large viewing screens were showing images from the outer edge of the galaxy that made his blood run cold. Space itself was being torn apart. Massive black shapes darker than the emptiness between stars were moving through normal space like sharks through water. Whatever they touched simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not converted to energy, but completely removed from reality. "What are those things?" someone shouted in panic. Admiral Chen appeared on the main communication screen. Her usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by grim determination. "Citizens of the galactic community," she said. "We are facing an invasion by entities that exist partially outside our normal dimension. They call themselves the Void Devourers, and they have consumed entire galaxies and other realities." The images on the screen showed the dark entities approaching inhabited star systems. Entire worlds winked out of existence as the creatures passed by. Millions of years of civilization, billions of lives gone in seconds. "All military forces are being mobilized," Admiral Chen continued. "But our conventional weapons cannot affect beings that exist outside normal space-time. We need every species to work together if we are going to survive this." Zexai watched in horror as the greatest fleet in galactic history assembled to face the Void Devourers, Krillian battleships with their massive armor plating. ethereal science vessels equipped with reality manipulation technology, Torgan heavy cruisers carrying enough firepower to destroy planets. The fleet engaged the Void Devourers at the edge of civilized space. For hours, the communication screens showed battle reports and tactical updates. Energy weapons that could vaporize asteroids had no effect on the dark entities. Reality warping technology that could bend space and time was useless against beings that operated outside those dimensions. One by one, the greatest military forces in the galaxy were being erased from existence. Then something changed on the communications screen. Admiral Chen appeared again, but she was no longer speaking to the galactic community. She was speaking in rapid human language to someone off-screen. Zexhai's translator could not keep up with the speed of the conversation, but he caught fragments. No choice now. Full activation. Species survival protocol. Admiral Chen turned back to address the galaxy. Citizens, I need you to understand what is about to happen. Humanity is going to attempt something that we have never done consciously before. We are going to reach out with our collective consciousness and edit these entities out of existence. But there is a risk, she continued. This will require every human in the galaxy to link their minds together. The process could affect local spacetime in unpredictable ways. We recommend that all non-human vessels move to a safe distance. Zexai felt a chill of understanding. This was what humanity could do when they worked together consciously, instead of just reacting unconsciously to threats. This was their true power. On the viewing screens, he could see human ships throughout the galaxy beginning to glow with a strange light. Not the harsh brightness of energy weapons, but something softer and more fundamental. It was the light of consciousness itself becoming visible. Then the humans began to sing. It was not music in any conventional sense. It was something deeper, something that resonated with the basic structure of reality itself. The song spread from ship to ship, from planet to planet, until every human in the galaxy was adding their voice to the chorus, and reality began to change. The Void Devourers, beings that had consumed entire dimensions, suddenly found themselves fighting something they had never encountered before. Not weapons or technology, but the focused will of an entire species that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Zexhai watched in amazement as the dark entities began to flicker and fade. They were not being destroyed. They were being edited out of existence, removed from the causal chains that had brought them to this galaxy in the first place. The process was not instant. It took hours of sustained effort from every human consciousness working in perfect harmony. But gradually, inevitably, the Void Devourers ceased to exist. Not just in the present, but retroactively. The damaged star systems reappeared as if they had never been threatened. The destroyed fleets returned to existence, their crews unaware that they had ever been in danger. When it was over, when the last of the dark entities had been erased from reality, the human song slowly faded to silence. Across the galaxy, humanity had saved every other civilization by using abilities that no one else fully understood. The communication screens went dark for several minutes. When Admiral Chen appeared again, she looked exhausted but relieved. The threat has been eliminated, she said simply. All species are safe to return to normal activities. That was all. No explanation of how it had been done. No discussion of the implications. Just a brief statement that the crisis was over and everyone could go back to their regular lives. But Zexhai knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Over the following days, he watched as the galactic community processed what they had witnessed. There were some attempts to analyze what had happened, some scientific papers speculating about the nature of human abilities. But gradually, inexplicably, these discussions faded away. People seemed to lose interest in understanding how humanity had saved them. Scientists found other research projects more compelling. Military leaders decided that conventional weapons were perfectly adequate for galactic defense. Politicians concluded that asking too many questions about human capabilities was not diplomatically wise. Once again, the galaxy was choosing not to look too closely at humanity. But this time, Zexhai understood why. The humans were not forcing anyone to forget or ignore what had happened. They were not manipulating memories or emotions. They were simply allowing other species to make the comfortable choice to not think about uncomfortable truths. The galaxy wanted to believe that humans were just another ordinary civilization, so that is what they chose to believe, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. A week after the crisis, Zexai made his decision. He walked into his laboratory and found Admiral Chen waiting for him, along with the small metal case containing the memory adjustment device. "Have you decided?" she asked. "Yes," Zexai replied. "I choose option 2. Admiral Chen smiled with genuine warmth. "I was hoping you would. You will make an excellent addition to our group. What happens now? Now you learn that humanity is not the only species with secrets. The universe is full of wonders that most civilizations are not ready to understand. You will help us maintain the balance that allows all species to coexist peacefully." She stood up and extended her hand in the human gesture of friendship. "Welcome to the real galactic community, Zexai, the one that exists in the shadows between the ordinary and the impossible." As Zexai shook her hand, he felt a strange sensation, as if reality was shifting slightly around him. He realized that he was now part of something much larger than himself, much larger even than his own species. He was part of the group that kept the galaxy stable by ensuring that its most dangerous secrets remained secret. Months later, Zexai published his final report on the mapping project for Sector 7749. The report concluded that the region contained natural phenomena that made accurate cartography impossible. He recommended that future mapping efforts focus on other areas of the galaxy. The report was filed in the official archives and forgotten by almost everyone who read it. But in the deep levels of Harmony Hub, in secure facilities that most people never knew existed, Zexai continued his real work. He helped monitor other species for signs of dangerous curiosity about human abilities. He assisted in managing the delicate balance of knowledge and ignorance that kept galactic civilization stable. And when necessary, he helped make sure that certain discoveries never came to light. The galaxy remained peaceful. Trade flowed freely between star systems. Diplomatic relations stayed cordial. Wars were rare and usually ended quickly through negotiation rather than conquest. Most people attributed this peace to good government, wise leadership, and the natural maturity of spacefaring civilizations. But Zexai knew the truth. The galaxy was peaceful because humanity stood guard at the edges of reality, editing out threats before they could fully manifest. The map of known space ended at human territory, not because of technological limitations, but because beyond that boundary lay forces and entities that most minds could not comprehend. The humans had made themselves the guardians of galactic civilization, not through conquest or intimidation, but by becoming something that transcended the normal boundaries of existence. And the most remarkable thing was that they did not want credit for it. They were content to let other species believe that peace came naturally,